The Witch is another in a long line of great A24 horror films and is also the film debut of Anya Taylor-Joy. It takes place in New England sometime in the 1630s and follows a family of Puritans as they're banished from the settlement they were a part of due to some form of religious dispute. The family consists of the father, William, mother, Catherine, her being pregnant with their fifth child, and their four children, eldest Thomasin, second eldest Caleb, and the fraternal twins, Jonas and Mercy. Not long after building their own homestead in the wilderness of New England, Catherine gives birth to the fifth child, Samuel, and Thomasin, while watching him and playing a game of peekaboo, watches as Samuel vanishes in front of her very eyes, with the film giving us the insight that a witch stole him and killed him and used him for witchcraft. This incident of losing Samuel begins the decline of the mental state of Catherine, who spends most of her time crying in bed or praying over his soul, believing that he has been damned to hell for not being baptized. It's clear that Father William has been trying to lead his family into a blessed, pious life. And he believes and teaches his children about this kind of line between piety and a blessed life and nature, with nature being closely aligned to sin. Both Thomasin and Caleb are shown praying quite a bit, with Caleb even reviewing what he's learned from his father about his very nature. Caleb clearly demonstrates that his religious upbringing has taught him that the nature of humanity is sin, and therefore nature in general is connected to sin and is something to be feared, and the family treats it as such. And in a very real way, this tiny little homestead right on the edge of the deep dark woods, which is highly representative of the nature of sin and corruption, is kind of like a little candlelight in the midst of a rainstorm. Things only get worse and worse for the family as William's harvest turns out to be mostly inedible, and even though he's sold his wife's cup to pay for hunting supplies, he's not finding much of anything that he's caught. As grief and hunger and starvation and the fear of oncoming winter really set in, the family devolves into paranoid accusations, with eldest daughter Thomasin being accused of witchcraft by both of her young siblings and her mother eventually believing them as well. Catherine was already primed to believe that Thomasin was the problem because she was almost a woman grown, and she felt, I think, jealous of her daughter's relationship with her husband. Slowly but surely, the family slowly is whittled away, leaving Thomasin alone, and at this time, having nowhere else to turn, she chooses to ask Satan for a covenant, sign his book, shed her clothes, which are the last symbol of her Puritan upbringing, and enter the woods, joining a coven of witches as they dance and chant and float through the trees. I love this movie. It's one of my favorite horror movies. I've seen it a few times, and my reading has always been that this is a story of what religious piety, and especially religious piety tied to, humans having a corrupt nature inherently, can do to a family unit, and eventually how it can be counterproductive. This family works themselves into a tizzy, praying, fearing, being convinced that they are of corrupt nature, to the point where all of them lose their lives, and the one who doesn't does get pushed into the exact type of life and lifestyle that the family was against. Thomasin bears the brunt of this. Her mother believes her to be a threat to her very relationship with her husband. The twins are perfectly fine ignoring Thomasin and even turning the tables and accusing her of horrific and heinous acts. I think William, in his own way, does love Thomasin very strongly, and he is heartbroken. But the problem is he's heartbroken because he believes his wife over his daughter when she says that she is a witch. His children's fear is so strong that they do turn to the very things he says are sin, to lies, to accusations, to, trying to paint the other as the problem so as to secure their own position of safety while also getting rid of competition, because as winter approaches, there will be many mouths to feed and very little food to go around. Do I think the twins, Mercy and Jonas, were thinking that strategically? No, but I do think that there is this effect of the fear being pushed on them and crushing them into this scenario where they feel the best course of action is to turn on their eldest sibling. This time, though, I wanted to watch it with the lens of what if they were right the whole time? What if Thomasin really was the one at fault and was this witch as they accused her of being? Does the movie have any evidence for that being the case? I think there's a case to be made. I still am strictly on the side of Thomasin is a victim and did nothing wrong, but if you did want to watch the movie with that, one of the very first scenes is Thomasin making confession. In her confession prayer, she says she has broken all of God's commandments in thought, which means she hasn't done these things, but she's imagined doing all of them. And when you first hear that, you think of being vain or what have you, or coveting other people's things and being materialistic in that regard. But then you remember some of those commandments are things like, honor thy father and mother, but also not to kill. And even in the opening scene where they're being banished by the settlement they were a part of, Thomasin is the last to leave. She does not want to. She wants to be a part of society. When walking through the woods with Caleb, she's reminding him of their life in England, how they had glass windows, which was clearly a sign of how well off they had been. And she is the one at the tree line alone with Samuel when he disappears. Is it possible that she is the one who got rid of Samuel, both believing him to be another mouth to feed that an oncoming winter might not sustain, and also because a dramatic, dark moment of losing a child might be, in her mind, enough to push the family to return to the settlement. After Caleb's disappearance and returning to the homestead, she insists on bedding down the goats. Her mother reluctantly agrees and says hurry back, and when she is doing so, she's seen just kind of petting the goats, clearly in no hurry. And this gives her the opportunity to find Caleb outside, naked and clearly feverish. When accusing Jonas and Mercy, her twin siblings, of being witches themselves, her evidence is that they claim to hear Black Phillip, their he-goat, speak to them. William grows frustrated with the amount of lies that are coming from his children, them accusing each other of witchcraft, and actually puts them in the pen with the goats and nails the entrance door shut with boards. And in the night, we see a witch feasting on the she-goat in the pen while the twins look on in horror, and then she attacks them with one shot of Thomasin also watching the scene in horror. And I don't have any other evidence for this other than vibes in that particular scene, but the way it's cut is strange because they show the shot of the witch eating the she-goat, and then they show a shot of the twins looking on in horror and then being attacked by the witch. And then after that, we see a separate shot that looks almost out of sync in time of Thomasin reacting in horror, and it's just her in the frame. Only for them to wake up in the morning to find the boards have been ripped off, the goat has been slain, and the twins are missing with Thomasin unconscious with bloody hands. And at the end of all of this, Thomasin is the only one left alive. Her conversation with Black Phillip at the end is very interesting because I believe it's mirroring her conversation of confession to God. She confesses to coveting these very materialistic things, and Black Phillip at the end offers them to her. He offers her the taste of butter, a pretty dress. He says, "Wouldst thou like to live deliciously?" And she says yes, and that's when she sheds the last remnants of the Puritan upbringing, becoming a naked woman walking into the woods to join a coven of witches. All that to say, I think there is a reading of this film where Thomasin is the witch, where the witch that we see throughout the film is more of a symbol for the monstrous acts Thomasin takes in service of material ends. And I think in that reading, in that framework, it's possible that her original goal was simply to get them to return to the settlement where they had more safety, more access to food, and more, comforts than they had in the middle of the wilderness. But I still think that my original interpretation is the one I'm more beholden to. Either way, though, I'm Team Thomasin. Even if she was a witch and she was doing it on purpose, her family, especially her parents, suck, so who cares? And if she wasn't a witch and she was just a victim, well, hey, this is what you guys get for pushing her so strongly in this direction and pointing at her as some convenient excuse for all of the problems in your life. But you should tell me what you think. What was your impression of the witch?